Yeah. So are you still in Oakland?
I'm still in Oakland. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll
Yeah.
start the interview. So we're on with Mr. Gary Bartz. Gary, thank you so much for joining us today for Jazz Appreciation Month.
Oh, glad to be here. Glad I could be here.
And congrats on the brand new album, part of the Jazz is Dead family.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So how did that come about? How did that come to be,
Um,
Adrian?
Probably. Well, they contacted me. Adrian contacted me about a couple of years ago about doing a show in Los Angeles, and which I ended up doing. It was a really nice show. I think it's on YouTube now. And so while I was down there, they sent me. They took me by their studio, and which is all analog studio, nothing digital.
Really?
Yeah, it's the way I started recording records.
Yeah.
Probably my first 20, 25 records were all like on the Neve board on the different, the good
Yeah.
mic. Well, the mics are the same, but um, I mean, he had the first ever Fender Rhodes, one of the first, the first models.
Right.
Yeah, which was really going back. But yeah, no, it's all analog. So I like the studio. So they said, well, maybe you'd like to do some tracks. So I went to the studio and we laid down some tracks. It reminded me of the way I used to do with the way the Mizell brothers would do. They would lay the tracks down and they would, bring me in and I would play over the tracks. I'd listen to the tracks and figure out how I wanted to compose my solos. And so that's how that was done. So this was very familiar territory, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Speaking with Gary Bartz. So Gary, let's go back to the beginning. Life in Baltimore. Give me an idea what it was like for you, because growing up in the 50s in Baltimore, I mean, there's so much going on musically as well as socially. So how are you able to navigate those two worlds?
Well, I mean, it was a segregated city.
Yeah.
I was the second, after they desegregated schools in 54, I went into high school at 55. So I desegregated school. There was 7 of us.
Wow.
And so it's a funny thing, but growing up like that, how could you not think you were different?
Mm.
I mean, you can't get signs, no Negroes allowed.
Right.
Well, I mean, as a kid, what do you know about that? I mean, and as a kid, you don't know about that. Kids don't know about that. They have to be taught it. This government teaches racism. It's built, the foundation is racism, and
literally,
they teach every day. They teach it. The George Floyd trial is a prime example of how they teach racism.
And you think about that with the George Floyd trial, because we work with a bunch of kids, so I had to tell them about Rodney King. They had no idea about Rodney King. That was They had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad, you're same age as you, and he told me something. He said up until 1992, no one had actually ever documented this kind of abuse until it was seen.
Say that again.
My dad was trying to explain to me when the Rodney King situation happened in 1992. That was really the first time that was actually documented about things that we've dealt with our whole lives as African Americans.
Yeah.
But that was the first time it was actually seen for the world to see what was happening. And
we saw it. We always have seen it, and we've been telling them that forever. I mean, I saw, what's his name, Roy, the comedian. He said, "We've been telling you since we've been here. Hell, we created the blues."
So time and time again, we see it, and people document it. People can see it for themselves, and yet it still doesn't change anything. I mean, things slowly get better, but still, people need to see it repeatedly.
They make it look like it gets better. The same way they teach it in school. The way they teach it in school, that's like a fairy tale.
Right.
The way they teach this history, and to have to say, in this day and age, Black History Month? Are you kidding me? Oh, so we're still not a real part of history. So what they're saying is what it's all about to them is white history. You know, when do they have White History Month? I guess the other 11 months are White History Month.
Right.
You
We
know,
get the shortest month of the year. Right.
it, this country is so. First of all, they're very uneducated. One of the most uneducated countries I've ever been to. You know,
By choice.
been in.
By
You know,
choice.
by choice. But every other country speaks more than one language. You know, well, and the foundation is not racism. You know, we have exported it. You
Right.
know, that's one of our big exports.
You think about that for a moment, Mr. Bartz. I mean, think about where you grew up in Baltimore, because a lot of folks don't understand, because Baltimore, where you grew up, was another world. I mean, in terms of systematic racism, the police brutality, all of it. You grew up in that atmosphere,
Yeah.
but yet you still were able to play music and discover this world of music, which we think that sometimes the jazz insulates us from reality, but it really doesn't. But what do you think? How do you feel?
Well, I mean, as kids, you know, you just be kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Kids are kids. I mean, and when you really, if you really want to think about it, what did our ancestors go through?
Oh man, yeah.
They took away their prime instrument, which was the drums. So
Mm.
what did we do? Everything we touched became the drum. My saxophone, Charlie Parker's the drum. If you write those rhythms down, you'll see the rhythms. You
Hmm.
know, if you put the
Yeah,
rhythms on all of those notes, that's all the drums. That's all James Brown. But that's we all come. That's where the music comes from.
wow,
This is
yeah.
the greatest music ever created on this planet, and probably it may be. Well, I don't know the rest of the universe, so I can't say that. But with the greatest, and it started in this country, and it was a result of our ancestors being brought here, you know. But the system is so corrupt, they can't even admit that. It's so corrupt. They have to keep the lie going.
Hmm.
They keep it going, and so that's why it continues to happen. That when I was growing, when I was a kid, we had the cops used to walk the beat, so we knew the cops. They were mostly white. I don't remember seeing many black cops, so-called black cops, but the so-called white cops would walk the beat. They knew my mom, my grandmother. They knew me. They knew us. They don't go out and shoot somebody you know. You know, now they bring these people in. They bring in Nazi sympathizers, racists, you know, just angry people, bipolar, you know, that no vetting. There's no vetting. And we wonder what happens, you know. We wonder why it happens, you
Yeah.
know. I
It's
mean,
funny we think about these things. So Gary, he tells I was years ago we spoke about this five,
mhm.
6 years ago, but just to recap on folks who may not know, talk about your time with Art Blakey and how did you end up being a jazz messenger at such a young age and that experience for you?
Well, you know, you say young age. I guess I was 24, 25.
Yeah.
And I guess that is young, yeah. I wasn't looking at it like it was young because I moved to New York when I was 17. So
Oh
it,
really? Oh
it took
wow.
me 7 years, 6, 7 years before I really started doing
So you were
something.
young.
Yeah, yeah. But my dad had a nightclub in Baltimore, you know, from 1960 to 1965.
What was it called?
It was called the North End Lounge. And so, you know, part of the reason he got it was because I was, you know, I mean, he was so supportive. My parents were so supportive. And when I you know, began to meet other musicians, and to find out that their family was not as supportive as my family was. You know, I felt, well, I can't fail. You know, they had supported me like this. You know, I got to prove to them that they're right. You know,
Right.
so but anyway, so he had a nightclub in Baltimore, the North End Lounge, and I would work there. Sometimes I would work there every weekend. I was still living in New York City. I would commute to you know, from New York to Baltimore on the weekends, and play at the club. A lot of times I would stay, but you know, but then finally he started um, bringing in name acts because I'm meeting people and he was meeting people. See, he started taking me around when I was 14 years old to sit in with musicians. And the first time he ever did that would have been, I guess, 54. And I said, Dad, you know, Sonny Stitt is going to be at this matinee. Can you take me? Because, you know, I couldn't, somebody had to take me.
Right.
And so he said, sure, you know. So we went to the matinee. I'm listening to Sonny Stitt, man. I'm enjoying it. And he gets on the mic and he says, well, ladies and gentlemen, I understand we have a young man who would like to come and sit in with us. And I'm so, wow, you know. And he calls my name. I said, oh my God. And my dad had sneaked my horn out of the house, you know, some kind of way. I never did ask him that, you know. But and went up and asked Sonny Stitt if I could sit in, you know, because he was wanting to know if I could play. My dad,
Right. Right.
Jimmy Cobb told me a story like that. He said, "Man, your dad asked me to come by the club one night to say, see, what do you think of it? See if he can really play." You know, but, so I went up and played with Sonny Stitt, and being from that generation, he took me through all the keys on the blues. You know, he's not gonna make it easy. They want to see what's going on. And fortunately, I learned music the proper way, and the proper way is by ear. Um, so I didn't know one chord from the other, but I
Gary,
could.
why is that? Why is that the important way to learn by ear? Because many musicians of your generation say that's really the best way to learn this music is by ear.
Well, it's because it's the natural way. It's the natural way. You don't know how to read, but you know how to hear.
Mm.
You know, I mean, Mozart was writing songs when he was 3 years old because he could hear. Musicians, I mean, hearing is the foundation of this. You know, hearing, okay, we hear each other, but what musicians do is we put the sounds that we're saying, like you hear me, now I'm up high a little bit, now I go down low. That's how we talk, you know, so there's sounds. So musicians put those sounds together in pleasing combinations. And it's so powerful, it can affect your body. You know, it can. That's why you have Gregorian chants. That's why soothing music. You know, you put it on. That's why sometimes music can give you a headache. It can do many things. You know, it touches you, and people pay money to come hear us.
Mm.
Hearing is the foundation.
Mm.
That's without hearing and without silence, there's no sound.
Right.